I hope no phone calls come in because sometimes it knocks it out. But nobody's called me all day, so I'm sure they'll call once while we're talking.
Oh, I see. Um, Hi, Fred. You can hear me and everything connected. We've just gone live.
All right.
Okay, so hello, welcome to our viewers from the United Kingdom, America, and around the world. Welcome to another In Conversation with myself, Paul Salahuddin Armstrong, and I'm joined by my good friend, Fred Dickson Jr. from the United States of America. Um, in a world that often celebrates success without understanding and the cost behind it, today's conversation invites us to pause and reflect on something deeper: resilience, purpose, and what it truly means to rise again. I'm honored to be joined by Fred Dickson Jr., an American football player whose journey took an unexpected and life-altering turn through cancer. And yet, against all odds, he found his way back onto the field. But his life didn't end there. It extends into brotherhood through Freemasonry, into services through community work, and even into the realm of public life, having stood for election for the Democratic Party. This is not just a story about survival, it is a story about transformation and an extraordinary life. Fred, welcome, and please say hi to our audience.
Well, I'll say hello to everybody because everybody needs to be said hello to.
That's
There's
true.
nothing more exciting than going somewhere and not knowing anybody, and you make eye contact, and the person looks at you and smiles, or says good morning or good afternoon. So we'll just say it's good morning here. I don't know what time it is there. What time is it there?
It's good afternoon here. So good afternoon to everyone in the UK. Good morning to everyone in America, and good evening to people in other countries. I think we've covered everything.
I told a lot of people, and it's the whole idea is to get communication going, and businesses, politics, religion, everything works on communication. And as you well know, how we met and how we got together, and we had a good time. And it's traveling. It's just getting around the world. If you can't get out personally, then you do something like this, and communicate with somebody in another country, and it's pretty phenomenal, considering my age and how it was not even it was a cartoon sci-fi when I was growing up. How about that?
Well, quite. And I mean, obviously, our viewers wouldn't know, but I mean, we've been friends now for what, over 15 years?
Something like
Originally
that.
connecting on Facebook. And then when I went to the United States nearly 10 years ago, you were one of the first people to welcome me to Washington, D.C. and to show me around.
Got you in a
I mean, in that
convertible.
lovely car that you had. I don't know if you still got it, but that was an amazing car that you showed me.
Yeah, I still have it. It's got a little um, fuel injection situation right now. I'm trying to resolve, but yeah, it's a cool car to you know get words out about cancer and football, whatever the issue could be at the time, politics. You know, they're all soft. They're all soft and hard conversations to have sometimes, unless we are of the caliber that you and I. We could talk about everything and might not agree on everything, but we can walk away and give each other a hug, and life goes on, and that's unfortunately not many
Yeah.
people can do.
I think that's the most important thing. It's the fact that we have that understanding that you can talk to someone and you don't have to agree on everything. But at the same time, even then, you know what gets me most of the time? It's like you can even meet people who you don't agree on just something little, but like 99% of stuff you might agree with one, and they will make that little 1% into something that they want to have a fight over. And then there's other people which they could disagree on about 60% of stuff, and they'll be totally chilled with each other and have no issue because at the end of the day, we're human, we're friends. What worry about it? Uh, we
Well,
need to get more of that spirit back. People are too much in echo chambers today, and they're not getting to know each other as people used to.
the biggest thing is respect, and that goes for everything. Where you're from, what you eat, what you talk about, what your religion is, what your politics position. It's just respecting another person. And my biggest line is open mind, open soul. If you open your mind up and I've had many conversations with many religious heads, and I'll say something and they'll go, "Oh no, we don't talk about that," or "Don't say that word around me," or "Don't say that man's name around," or so forth and so on. And that's I got a problem with that. I mean, that we should be able to talk about anything, and without somebody screaming, "Don't say that, it offends me," or it. But if you have an open mind and like we do, and we just talk and we share information, all of a sudden the world becomes different. If there's a lot of religions that won't even talk to another religion, they're not allowed to, or they don't want to, or whatever. And it's
I
so
think it's more people, those particular people rather than religions. I don't see like Islam as a whole or Christianity as a whole or any of these major religions say that. I mean, there are some cults that are like that, but generally speaking, the major religions are not like it's people, it's human beings that are saying these things.
well. There's something I learned through to my cancer. I spoke to you the other day about, and I'll bring it up, is that when I had I had stage 4A head, neck, and throat cancer, and I had met with the surgeon, and I was telling you, had a cutaway head, a fiberglass, medical head of a human head with the skeleton, and then he could take the different parts, take the neck out, the nose, the eyes, and you could see what was under it. And he was showing me where he was going to do the operation on my 37, take out 37 lymph nodes and take out my tonsil and go down with a robot and explain all this stuff. And I'm looking at this head and I'm like, wait a minute, from the head up, can you tell the difference when you take the skin off if it's male or female? And he said, no. He said, from the neck up, male, female, everybody's exactly the same for a surgeon. Certain organs are bigger than others. Some are smaller. That some might have 76 lymph nodes. Some might have 50. Everybody's different in that category, but there's really no way to tell the difference without the skin on a human skull, male and female. And I was at that moment, I got like this little epiphany, which is like, this is what it is. I mean, we don't come from different planets. We're humans. So
Yeah.
everything's the same. If my blood happens to match yours, I can donate your blood. If your DNA needs your body needs something from my DNA, maybe they can take it. There's a lot of things that can go on, and that we're really interchangeable if they can go through our genetic codes and find the common denominator, which would be like a father to a daughter, a father to son, a mother to daughter. And those parts sometimes can be interchangeable, but now we're making them, and we're really advancing
It's
technologically.
remarkable actually where medical science has come. And I mean, yourself, I mean, alhamdulillah, you look very well. In fact, you don't look like you've aged much since when I saw you 10 years ago. It's and I know you've been through some battles since then. So
well, I've had enough. But
yeah.
Let me finish up with this because I can get off this topic. But when I said to the guy, I said, "Well, no, we're all the same. Why do we?" It upsets me that neurologically and physiologically and everything in our medically we're the same. And he said, "Yeah, I know what you mean." I said, "But look, so we're the highest echelon of life. But look out that window." And he's like, "What?" I said, "We're in a doctor's office on like 10th floor." I said, "Look out the window." And there's this huge parking lot full of cars. And I said, "So you see all those cars out there?" And my wife said, "Stop interrupting him. He's trying to help you." I said, "I got a question."
Yeah.
And I said, "Look out in the parking lot, all those cars. Tell me where the dipsticks are on all those cars. Some don't have them. They might be electric." I said, "But every one of them is in a different spot, and you have to know where it is to find it." Now, how can we have something that we make, and we've got to make every one of them different, but the creator of us made us all exactly the same, just give different colors, different thoughts, different skin tones, different hair, some none. and so forth and so on. So that was my little epiphany that reinstated everything that I had already learned and participated in my whole life. And just to back up on myself a little bit, I really believe that history of each individual uh, designs their nature, their thoughts, and things like that. So when we're children, it is very important. Now, when I was 8 years old, it was 1968. I just finished the first grade. There is no kindergarten in those days. So I had just finished the first grade, was going into second, and my father, it was summertime, had just started school let out, and Dad came into my room, and it was dark out, and his son was getting ready to come up, and he says, "Get up." And I said, "For what?" He said, "We're going to work." I'm like 8 years old. I don't want to go to work. I want to play with my friends in the alley and the woods. And he's like, "No, you're going to work." And I started crying. I said, "I don't want to go to work." And he said, "If you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about." And then I'm telling mom. Mom comes in. She's got her lunches. She says, "Get out of bed and get dressed. You're going to work with your father." And I'm like, "But I don't want to go to work." And he beat me with a belt, threw me in a truck, and we went to work. Back then, beating your kids was cool. It was okay. If you didn't listen, talk back, you're a good kid. You didn't get hit. But I like to talk back a lot, so I got whacked a lot. So we got in this truck and went to work, and we did service work. We were mechanical contractors. So he said, "We're going to this job," and he said, then we're going to go to another job, but we have a new construction job, and then we got a service call." And he said, "When we go there, you're going to take your shoes off. You're going to shut your mouth. You're not going to say anything. You only answer when someone speaks to you. And if they do, you only answer the question that they asked you. Do you got that?" And I said, "Yeah, yes, sir." And he said, "Because if you do anything else," he says, "we're going in different religions, different colors, different, everything's going to be different. Every rich people, poor people, um, subsidized people. We're going all over the place. We could be in a millionaire's house back then. There wasn't billionaires. We could go in a millionaire's house, and then 10 minutes later, we're in a Section 8 or welfare house. And that's what I was taught. So, and I remember going into all these different nationalities and smelling the different aromas of the foods that they were cooking, from the African to the Indian to the African. I mean, all these different, people that were here. And I learned real quick that, you had to respect everybody because they were paying us. So that programmed me at a young age to be very open minded. And of course, we went to church on Sundays, but I was fascinated as a young boy when you went to people's homes. When you go into somebody's house, you immediately get to know what they like, what colors they like, what paintings they have on the wall, what family. You get this whole life story in a couple seconds.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it'll do. And what I learned later, once I'd be able to do them by myself, was if I saw something interesting in their house religiously or all the senses, I would ask questions like, "Wow, that's it." Even if it didn't smell good, I would say, "Wow, what is that? It smells really delicious." And it really didn't, but they were eating it, so you wanted to be nice. And you begin to learn this stuff. And I did this all my life. I'm going on like almost 59 years of, going in people's houses and meeting
Amazing.
people.
Yeah.
And I think that made me want to understand other religions, other political ideas. I want to learn. I wanted to learn that stuff at a young age. And as you get older and you get control, then you can do more of your own. But when I was younger, I had to listen to what my dad said. So I think that molded me to where I am today in the world, as far as politically and masonically and religiously, and I just have a big open mind. And if someone wants to tell me their religion, I'm all ready to listen to it. And then I make my own evaluations, and maybe I just take some bits and pieces from it, or maybe I enjoy it, or move into it wholeheartedly. I've never read any books on any religions, nothing. I, as the door opened for me to visit other religions and political sides and things like that, I just did it. And that because of my training as a young child, and this allowed me to put a puzzle of my life together and a puzzle of the world together. And also understanding mechanically how things work, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, construction, masonry, cutting tiles, cutting stone. Uh, these are things I've done my whole life, and I took more of these trades on more and more as the years went on because other people couldn't do their jobs, and my job depended on their job to do it right. And if they messed it up, then I had to do it. So over the years, I got master's license in all the trades, and I built my own stone shop, built my own showrooms. I worked for a wholesaler when I got out of college, learned the wholesale industry. And then I began to expand from there. I built my own showrooms, I built my own stone shop, built my own cabinet shop, imported my own stone, had my own glass shop. I mean,
Amazing.
and I was the only one that could do all this stuff in my company, and everybody basically just watched me work. So I had all these things, and I had my own radio show on a tri-station here, one of the biggest 50,000-watt tri-stations of Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia. And I had a home improvement show, and they switched to sports, and I knew a lot about sports playing football in college and semi-pro that I started talking about sports on my show. So I've traveled these roads of life, and I didn't ask for them. And then I got
You mentioned sports there as well. I mean, take us back a little bit. I mean, because you're obviously known as an American football player. So what first drew you to the sport?
well, that's cool because I was a young boy in the 60s when they started the first Super Bowl. And we had the Baltimore Colts, and I had all their pictures on my wall, the players back when I was a little kid, because I just couldn't wait to play football because it was a big sport in the 60s. And the first Super Bowl came out in 60, I think it's 68 or 69, and it was Super Bowl one. The Green Bay Packers won both of them. Bart Starr was a quarterback. And I was just like an 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid. I'm excited about sports, baseball, football. But only two I played was football and baseball. And I didn't like baseball because somebody was throwing a ball at my head, and they didn't know how to throw the ball. So I got hit a lot. So I didn't really like baseball, but I liked football because you could.
You know, my dad told me when he was at school and he was playing cricket, and he got smacked by a cricket ball as well, which is basically like a baseball. And he said he wouldn't believe it, Paul. You know, back in those days, there was none of this kind of like, you know, carefulness like they have now. It was just like they expected you to just get back up. You know, it's like my head hurts.
Well, the same way with me. When
Yeah.
I was a kid, when I started, I was like, I think 10, 9 or 10, and the strictness and the athleticism that they influenced on us and made us do, it's against the law now. They can't do that stuff. The kids, even in college today, they can't do it. I remember when I played, we went by age and weight. So I think it was 120. You had to be a maximum of 125 pounds, and they had a weigh-in. And after the weigh-in, then you didn't have to be weighed anymore, so you could gain the weight back. And I remember I was 138, and I had to lose 10, 13 pounds, and I had 5 hours to lose 13 pounds. And all the guys on the team wanted me to play for them because I was a big guy. The coaches wanted me to play, but if I didn't make that weight, I couldn't be on the team. So we had a field, an athletic field there, and with a track around it. And the coach said, just start running around the track. Don't drink any water, and just keep running and running until you have to go to the bathroom. So I ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. And I got on the scale, and each time I got on, it dropped a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds. Well, after 4 hours of running with no water, there's a thing called a heat stroke.
Yeah, I was just
Years
thinking
old.
this. It wouldn't be
And
allowed now to do that.
no, couldn't do that
Yeah.
today. But I kept running, and then one of the kids' father was a fireman, and he said, "I think I got my suit in the truck," and he ran out and got his black and yellow fireproof suit, and I ran around the track in my underwear and t-shirt with this big long uh, fireman's jacket on, and then eventually a whole team was following me as we were running around trying to lose this weight. And I was getting real dizzy and I didn't know what was going on. And they're like, "You can do it." So I just kept doing it. And finally I got on the scale, and that thing, it was one of those ones that teeter totter and you move the scale back and forth. And I remember seeing it go up to 26, to 126, and then down to 124. And then it balanced out and it wanted to go touch 220, 126. And the official said, "He's 125, it's good." And we were all, I remember, like we were all screaming and cheering. And then I got some water. We didn't have Gatorade. I had water. And I went through a mini heat stroke and didn't even know.
Wow.
And, you still there?
I'm still here. Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Hold on. Oh, there. Somebody called in and it cuts it off here. I don't know what happened on the end. So anyway, we played that year, and that was I got to watch the first Super Bowl where everybody got to see it, and I've seen every one since. So that's been pretty cool. But then when I got this football stuff gets long, so I'm going to try to dilute it down a little bit. I played all these years as a young kid, and when I got to high school, we didn't start school until the 10th grade. So it was 10, 11, 12 through basically. I was a sophomore when you came to high school. You spent middle school, you stayed till the ninth grade. Now I think sometimes some of them are like 9, 10, 11, 12. But anyway, but I had played all these years, and I had problem with my knees, and I had to get a physical. And the doctor said I had Osgood-Schleider's disease, which is when your body grows faster than your kneecaps. And they said I couldn't play football. And I had to wait for my body to catch up. Well, I was pretty upset about that. And so that football season of 10th grade, I couldn't play. So the next season that came up the following year before football was lacrosse. Well, we're talking about 1974. So everybody in our school didn't know what lacrosse was. We only had one kid in the whole school that ever played it. And they said football players play it. And I said, "Well, what do you do?" And they said, and I actually talked to the coach. He said, "Do you play football?" And I said, "Well, I couldn't play this past year." And he says, "Well, you're a pretty big guy," because I was like 6'3" or something at that time. No, I'm gonna take it back. About 6 foot. When I got to college, I was 6'3", 6'4", and then I got to 6'5". But so he said, "You ought to play lacrosse." I'm the lacrosse coach. And I said, "What's lacrosse?" He said, "It's football with a stick." And I said, "A football with a stick?" And he says, "Yeah." He said, "You get to hit people with a stick." I said, "Oh, wow. I never hit people with a stick before. That sounds cool." So he said, "Come to
I'm not
practice."
familiar with lacrosse either, to be honest. It's
Well, I didn't know. And we went to the field that next day, and they gave us sticks, and he said, "Who wants to play goalie?" And I said, "What's a goalie?" And he said, "The people throw the ball at you and you stop it." I said, "Oh, do I get to play the whole game?" He said, "Oh, yeah, you get to play the whole game." So I went out for goalie. Now, this guy was unorthodox. He's really mean and nasty. And he gave me a woman's leather wooden lacrosse stick, goalie stick. And it looked like an Indian stick. It was like a L, and it had the leather for the pocket and everything. Anyway, but he wouldn't let me wear a chest protector, but he let me wear a helmet. And nowadays you get killed. And I had all these cherries all over my body from getting hit by all the guys shooting. And I wound up coming home one day, and my mom saw me get out of the shower with a towel on as I came out of the bathroom. And she saw these red and purple marks, all circles all over me. She goes, "What is that?" And I said, well, I'm playing goalie and I'm getting hit. And the coach won't let me have a chest protector. And she said, well, I'm going to talk to your father about this. So he said, you know, you either change positions or make that guy, you can get blood clots and die. Does this guy know that? I said, I don't know. So I went back to him and he said, oh, you don't want to play goalie now after 4 games. He goes, well, he tells you what? He goes, I said, well, I'm just telling you what my dad said. And he said, well, you can sit on the bench. You're not playing. So I sat on the bench for the rest of the games and another guy played. But I did finish off the next 2 years in lacrosse because then I went to varsity. But I didn't play goalie. I played defense. So when I went out for football in high school, um, everybody was glad to see me because most of the guys knew me from the rec league. And I was a big kid. I was bigger than most of the kids out there. But the head coach, the assistant coach, was the lacrosse coach. So he had it out for me. And he wound up the first cut they had, they put me up on, if they said, if your name's not on the list, you're done. So I went and checked the list and my name wasn't on there. So I went to the coach and I said, what's the problem? He goes, you didn't really think you're going to play for me, did you? I said, well, why not? He said, because I've already had a run-in with you. And so he wouldn't let me play. And he wasn't going to let me on the team. So I put it to myself that I was going to go to college and play. And that's what I did. I wound up going to college at Salisbury on the Eastern Shore, and I made the team there. And when I told the coach, you know, I sent them my resume and stuff, and then I went. We didn't have anything else to send, just a piece of paper. And I wound up coming out for the team, and there was only like 2 other people on the whole team out of 110 guys that was bigger than me. And he's like, "Why didn't you play in high school?" I said, and I told him the story. And so I was really energetic, but we used to have 3 practices a day, which was morning, afternoon, and evening. And then we had a team meeting, and each one of them lasted 2 hours apiece. So we were on the field 6 hours a day, plus an hour of a meeting at night. And of course, nowadays they can't do any of that anymore. And when we played, water was a gift. It wasn't a requirement. So we had a lot of heat strokes. I had 2, took hospital rides 2 times. But I kind of knew it was coming from when I was younger, but they didn't care. So I had to walk back from the hospital both times as I left an ambulance to get back to the school because nobody even went with me. So you know, that was my college, and it was, you know, but I still enjoyed. I just loved playing, and
I can see that the way you're coming across, even the passion's still there. After
well,
all
yeah, I would do it again if I didn't have open heart surgery a year and a half ago. But
of course, I mean, in the US, I mean, American football occupies the same sort of place that we call football, but you call soccer does in the UK.
You call it football.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the interesting part with this was that I finished off 2 seasons, and then we got a new head coach, and he was very put it this way, he used a lot of curse words, and he made you feel like a small insect. So when he called everybody into his office for the first meeting that was already on the team, he started chewing me out and cussing at me. And my father didn't even talk to me like that, you know? I mean, he said a lot of things, but he didn't talk to me like this guy was. And I had already had some run-ins with teachers there, professors that didn't like football players. And it was more of an academic school. And they had just got a new president, and he wanted to do away with sports. And there was a big conflict between alumni and the players. So this guy was basically brought in to destroy the system, is what I could figure out. But he made everybody quit. That he chewed you out to the point you couldn't stand it. Most guys just got up and left and said, you know, either I'm going to quit or I'm going to keep going and prove to this guy. Well, I'd already been chewed out by a professor for a game once. Said to me, he said, are you going to play in the NFL? And I said, no. He said, do you pay money? Do they pay you money to go here and play? And I said, no, it's Division III. We have to pay. And he said, so you're going to fail my class if you don't take this exam. And I said, but can't I just take it with another class? He said, no, you fail. So the coach called him, and the coach went over and spoke to him. And he called me in my dorm and said, you got to take this exam. You have a car, drive there and meet us. And we were playing James Madison, which happened to be in the playoffs this year. But anyway, I drove all the way there in my own car and without GPS. And I barely got there in time. Anyway, I just took that a long ride thinking, and I listened to what that guy said. And then when this coach chewed me out and started doing all this stuff to me, I got real mad. And I stood up and I said, well, I'm quitting anyway. So I cussed him out more than anybody ever probably cussed him out. Like he cussed me. And then I wanted to flip the desk on him, but I controlled myself, but I pointed my finger and stuck it in his face because I was a lot bigger than this guy. And I said, you know what? I quit. I'm not playing for you. And I got up and I turned and I opened his door, and he had all these trophies hanging on the wall from all these different years or whenever he coached. And I knew that if I slammed this steel door, there was a steel door, but I knew from my construction that the framing was steel, and it wasn't drywall, and it was drywall on steel 2x4s, and I knew it was very flexible. So I already had planned it in my mind when I went out. I was going to slam this door as hard as I could to knock all the trophies off the wall. And I took that door and I slammed it as hard as I could, and I could hear them all falling on the floor. And as I came out, I played defensive end. The defensive coordinator was walking by. Hey, did you meet the new coach? I said, I gave him some vulgar language, and I said, you know, I'm done. He goes, oh, he's doing that to everybody. I said, nobody talks to me like that. Never. I don't talk to people that way. They're not going to talk to me. I quit. And I left. So when I got out of college, then I went to rugby. You know what rugby is.
Yeah, we have rugby here.
Yeah, I played, well, after football, the last 2 years, I played a rugby league in the college, and that was a lot of fun. And then when I left college, a friend of mine called me and he said, in 1983, and he said, why don't you come play semi-pro with us? Well, I said, when's it start? And he said, about 3 weeks. So I'm running, I'm doing all these exercises, I'm lifting weights, I'm doing everything. I show up, and if you ever seen the movie The Replacements, I was in that movie in 2000. It's called The Replacements with Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman. And I was in that, and it was almost like that, where there was just a bunch of riffraff guys together playing, and we won 2 championships. And that was the epitome. I started all the games and the championship games, and we won 2 Mason-Dixon championships in a row. And then my father said, you better stop playing, because if you get hurt, because now I'm working for my dad. And he said, if you get hurt, I'm not paying for anything. So I wound up quitting. And then I got the cancer in 2010, and I was the first oral robotic surgery in Maryland Hopkins history. This is 30 years of, 2010 would have been 27 years since I had played. And I had stage 4 head, neck, and throat cancer, and I was the first oral robotic surgery in Maryland Hopkins history. And that's the only reason why I'm alive today, is because of the robot that took the cancer out of my throat. And as you see, I haven't had any water. I might have to take a little sip here. But most people up to that point had to have a water bottle because they would burn up or take out your saliva gland. But my doctor was the number 2 doctor in the world by chance, by luck, whatever, miracles or whatever you want to call it. And he perfected the saliva transfer. So when they took the cancer out and I was going to have, normally they do radiation and then an operation and then chemo. But this doctor, since I was going to be the first robot operation, they wanted to operate first, then chemo, then radiate and chemo. So they took the cancer out. It was 6.5 centimeters in my throat to the left side. And they went in with the robot, instead of tearing my face off and having maybe 6 or 7 surgeries and bone grafts. I don't know if you ever seen people walk around like this. in the old days,
Yeah.
that was because they had throat cancer and they had
Mm.
to take out all the muscle and everything in your throat. But mine, they were able to take, that robot was able to take the cancer out within 1 millimeter. Now, I don't know, you're on metric. You know how much 1 millimeter
We
is?
know, yeah. I mean, my parents' generation was on imperial,
Well, what they,
but I grew up with metric, so yeah, I know a millimeter.
it was crazy. I mean, that guy went in
That's
and
remarkable, actually, when you think about it, especially in surgery. Um,
and they, every piece he cut, he tested it. So the surgery was 9 hours, and they had 15 or 18 surgeons were invited from around the world, and I had to sign a release for them to video it, and so they could get taught through the video of what they were doing to me for the first time. And I'm sure you heard of Johns Hopkins. So there was a Johns Hopkins doctor
oh, it's
working.
famous, yeah.
Yeah, and this guy was number 2 in the world, and he performed the surgery, and that's why I'm here 16 years later. So
Oh,
most of the people I met there died. I had to feed myself to the stomach for a year. Uh, there was no food that could go down my throat. I could rinse my mouth out. All the water had to go through a feed tube in my stomach, and I
mm.
had 37 radiations where they strap your head to a table, put a cage over it, and radiate you. Uh, it was it was torture. Um, when I think about it today, I choke up because I cried to die every day, Paul. And I used to get up in the morning and just cry and ask God to take me because it was so painful. And I had taken a lot of pain in football, and I think I could take more than a lot of people. And I think that might have helped because a lot of people go through cancer and have to get, and they've never had pain. They've never played sports. They never
Yeah.
had their mouth dry up where they were going to throw up. They've never passed out because the heat, not enough water in your system. And I went through all that. And I tortured my heart a lot at a young age, and on the heart's a muscle. Now, a year and a half ago, I had open heart
I was actually
surgery.
going to ask you that, like,
Yeah, well,
what
that
did you
would lead
actually get
me
from the
to this.
sport? But I mean, I think you're right. All of that you did through the sport at a young age, all
Right.
that difficulty which people often don't have today, it's unless they're
Now,
inside the
well,
country,
first of all,
certainly not in a Western country.
they
And
can't
it's
torture
like
you.
that's actually helped you to get through this. It's
I, I really believe, and when I give lectures to the football teams that I talk to, every 4 years I go back to my college, but I've been to a bunch of other colleges, Division III, and all I do is inspire them to keep going, keep playing, and stuff like that. And I compare the 15 doctors that worked on me. There was a nutritionist, a radiologist, a chemotherapy. I had all these different doctors, surgeons, all these doctors that worked on me to keep me alive. And it's just, it changes you because I had a lot of faith and things like that. And believe me, when I was growing up, I cried with a lot of pain and torture from getting beat with a belt for doing stupid stuff. And, then playing football, getting beat up and doing the things I did there. And I went to bed many a night and so sore that I couldn't even get up in the morning or crying in the night because the pain was so great. We didn't have Tylenol and stuff back then. You had aspirin, baby aspirin. That's all you had. So, I went through a lot. So I think that played a big part on my being able to take some of this pain. And then your heart is a muscle, and I believe that all that, and I did bodybuilding, weightlifting, my all in between those 30 years of not playing, but not all the time. I'd take long breaks and come back. But the heart's a muscle, and I think I had a strong heart because there's 3 major arteries that come out of your heart, and one's the widowmaker, and then there's a secondary, and then there's the third, then there's a bunch of other ones. So when they say a quadruple, it's because they're going off into the secondaries. But my widowmaker, like I said, was 100% clogged, and the secondary was 99. Might as well say 100. And then the other one, they didn't really tell me, but the one one of the nurses said it was like 65. So my body was functioning off of 35% of my heart being
Wow.
left out of everything else gone, or less than that. Probably even less than that. But anyway, my heart's at 35 now. That's why that's coming up. But you need 55% to live pretty normally. But I'm at 35. But I'm okay. I mean, it took me a year and a half for my body to recuperate and regenerate. Because when they cut you open for that, they break all your ribs and they cut them. And then they wire them back together. So there was a lot of pain during that, but that was nothing compared to what I got to the cancer. The first surgery, like I said, they went in and took my tonsil out. That was 9 hours. And then the second time they went in and they slit my throat and took out 37 lymph nodes. And then the doctor said I had cancer on my jugular, but he knew that he didn't have to cut the jugular. He said, I'd seen it before and I knew I could skin it like a snake. So he just took it and sliced it right up the jugular and took it off. So he didn't, and I didn't, so that came off. And he said later when I was talking to some other doctors, he said, any other doctor just would have cut it and said you had to live with the other three. So I kept hearing all these different stories of how things came about
Remarkable, doctor.
with folded stuff. So, but what it does, when you think you're going to die, I was 80% chance of dying and 20% chance of living, and it was 4A. There's 1AB, 2AB, 3AB, 4AB, and then terminal. So I was 4A. So I had already, after you get all these surgeries and you start this chemo and you're throwing up, they gave, I had to buy a pill to make me from throwing up, but I felt like I wanted to throw up all the time. But, you go through that, and then you got a food tube in your stomach that you got to feed 3 meals a day, which was 3 cans of Ensure and three glasses of water. And I had to do that every day. And I lost my taste and the other senses picked up. And when you accept that you're going to die, and people do it every day, but most of them die. If you accept it and you realize you're going to die and you start planning to die, and all I was doing was planning my death. But then somebody said to me, why don't you plan on living? Why don't you plan on that instead of concentrating on death? And I said, you know what? So I started doing that. But during that process, and there's a lot of religious organizations that do this to the priests, ministers, imams, rabbis, they torture them or they put them through a self-torture. Also, the Buddhists do it, the Hindus do it. And what they're doing inadvertently now, I know because I traveled through them all, because if you walk through death and you don't die, then something gets unlocked. A firewall comes down in your head. And you might be able to call it enlightenment. And you can get this many, many different ways. But to get it really strong and break a lot of firewalls and to really be intense, you've really got to go through death. And most people don't. But if you do, then you'll experience, and when I say going through death, I'm not talking about, I was in an automobile accident, I saw my life fly between my eyes. Okay. No, I'm talking about getting up in the morning and you can't even get your body, you can't drink, you can't eat, and you can't go to the bathroom half of the time. And you're crying because you want to die. You don't want to take this anymore. It's too much. And then you walk away. And then you start everything all over again. Then you feel invincible. You feel like you can do anything. You feel like you want to do more. But what it does to a person like me was it made me want to help people with cancer. It made me want to talk to them if they needed to have someone to talk to survive instead of people hearing all the bad stories. I wanted to be able to push limits to test it to see if I pushed it to this limit, was I really being blessed? Did I really get another chance? People always say, well, God's got a job for you. I say, well, if he don't send me an email or text, I don't know what I'm doing. But all these, when I got done the chemo, the radiation, and walked out, and then got my taste back, all this stuff came to a head. And then when I started going public again, Oh my gosh, I had all types of things going on to me. And I'll just give you two of those because there's too many. But the biggest impact was a friend of mine called me and he said, "Listen," he said, "we had a speaker at our what was it, what was something church, non-denominational church." He said, "Have you ever talked about your cancer?" I said, "No, I've only been, I just finished all the treatments and I'm just starting to, I had a hard time talking." And I said, "But I can talk." And he said, "Well, would you like to come and give your story to our church?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but I'm not prepared. When is it?" He goes, "2 hours."
Oh gosh.
He said, "The guy's not showing up that was supposed to give the speech tonight. We can't get anybody else. We got food. We got all these people coming, and I knew you'd do it."
No pressure.
So I did it. And
Yeah.
this woman came up to me afterwards and she said, and she's crying, and she said, "You won't believe this." She said, "Look, my husband just got diagnosed with the same cancer today. And God gave me this a feeling to come to this meeting tonight. And here you are talking about it." She said, "Would you talk to him on the phone? Because he's really upset." So I went outside, talked to that guy for an hour. And I came back in, and all the people who wanted to talk to me had to wait, but they were eating food and stuff. But then I started talking to all these people, and they want, I'm showing them the scars, and they're pretty relevant at that point. And I realized that I really enjoyed telling the story because it had a good ending, and it was me, and they could actually see it. And I had so many people come up to me and say, "My wife died, my son died, my husband died," and it just gives you a reality check on how lucky you are. And then from there, almost every time I went out in public, something would happen. Somebody would come up to me. But I always want to put the scientific thing behind it, and that was I was radiated 37 times to an extreme where my whole neck was completely black as my jacket because the radiation had burned everything in there. And my body was loaded with radiation. And I want to believe that these people came up to me because they felt the radiation. But on the other hand, there's something that pops up that says, uh, look at the stories they came up with. How did they know? And then you start to wonder, is the dimensions, the angels, whatever's out there that we can't see, are they sending these people my way to help, for me to guide? I don't know. But there was two that were the biggest. I'm looking at the time, making sure we don't run past. But I think it's important to hear these. Is that I was in a
Well, we
Hallmark
can go on
store.
a
A
little
guy
bit
came up.
longer if you want to, but I don't want to make you, longer
No,
than.
I'm not going anywhere. I got plenty of time.
Yeah.
No, I don't have anything planned today. But the point is, I went the first one was in a store after that next day, and I'm looking for Mother's Day cards or something. And this guy came up to me, and as I reached for the mother, he started asking me questions. Next thing you know, he's talking to me, and he's telling me about cancer and his mom, and I'm like, oh boy. Okay, so I talked to him, and then I went to a restaurant that I go to, and I usually sit at the bar to eat my breakfast. And this guy come in, and he starts talking to me, and he said he hadn't been in the place for 20 years. He woke up this morning, and something told him to come in here. And he's sitting next to me, and he's telling the bartender, or not the bartender, the waiter, all this information he's at the bar. And and I looked at him, and he said, "Yeah, I was in Vietnam, and I did all these horrible things." And he's going on and on telling this guy. When he walks away, I said, "So what kind of horrible things did you do?" He said, "Well, I was in Cambodia." I said, "First of all, you don't belong in Cambodia. You belong in Vietnam." He goes, "Well, I was doing ops, and I was in Cambodia." And I said, "Okay." I said, "So what did you do?" He said, "Well, just to make a long story short, we were blowing up this bridge during a religious holiday. And when we blew it up, my job was to go wrong and make sure everybody was dead." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, I had a big Bowie knife and I sliced all their throats. If it came out dark, if it just oozed, then they were dead. If it shot a reddish, that means they were still alive, and I finished them off." He said, and I feel really bad about it. And I said, well, did you do this? And I pulled my neck back and showed him my scar. And he goes, no, if I did it, you wouldn't be here. So then he got mad at me and he started, like starting to tell me all this mean stuff. And I said, look, dude, just take a break, okay? I said, I went through, and I told him my story, and all of a sudden the guy starts crying. He goes, oh my God, I was supposed to come in here to talk to you today. And I said, well, how do you know that? He said, because I told you I haven't been here in 20 years, but I felt like I had to come. And it was to talk to you and hear your story. And I got chills all over my body. And I said, you getting chills? And he said, yeah. I said, you know, it's God, right? And he goes, oh, no, I didn't. But he said, I felt that a lot in Vietnam. And he said, so anyway, when I got done with him, he said he was going to go back to Mass. He said he was going to go maybe talk to the priest. And he was just completely blown away, gave me a big hug, and never saw him again. But I helped him. And I told him that, I said, the things you did wasn't because your religion told you to do it. You did it because the government was making you do it. You had no choice. So for those reasons, and you can go to Islam and all the killings and the Christianity and all the killings and all the Islamic killings and all the Indian killings and all the Mormon killings and it's all there. They all did it. But this guy was in a trauma because he felt like he was old and he wasn't going to get to heaven and all these ferocities that he caused. And I said,
it's awful, you know, what war makes people do. And obviously, I mean, he's just one example of someone who's been terribly traumatized by what he was made to do. And of course, I mean, just thinking about it is traumatizing, you know, let alone actually doing it.
This is hand stuff. So,
yeah.
But I worked him over and I told him everything I knew. And I said, well, maybe I was brought in here this morning because I hadn't been in here in a week or two eating breakfast. And I said, and here you are. So these aren't coincidences. I believe they're
it's really uncanny when that happens as well, isn't it? And you end up meeting someone that you were meant to speak to. And,
all the time.
It's happened to me a number of times over the years as well. And I accept it now. It's just I know that's one of the ways things happen.
When you talk to somebody,
when it first started happening, I was thinking, oh, that's strange. I wonder why that happened. You know.
And you know what to say too, because you're prepared, and you're able. If somebody comes to you and they've got an issue, which probably happens a lot, and all of a sudden your mind says, well, this is what I need to tell them, or that's what I need to tell them, or there's a scripture.
That's the strangest thing, isn't it? Especially if it's something you've never said before, and suddenly it comes. And
I wasn't trained. I wasn't trained in any of this stuff. I didn't know, but I felt like I knew exactly what to say, and I said it. And anyway, it was a great experience. It was weird, but that was a big one. And then of course, the other two I just told you about. But then the third one was the worst. I was in a CVS store, and we were standing in line for medications, and this woman comes up to me, and there's like 20 people in line, and she comes up and she goes, God told me to talk to you. I said, oh, no, not again. And I looked at her and I said,
yeah, I must admit, I have moments like that as well, when it's just like, I just want to go and get what I'm supposed to be getting. I didn't come in for that.
And I said, well, I don't want to. I said, let me cut to the story. I had stage 4 head, neck, and throat cancer. I'm supposed to be dead. I had chemo, radiation, fed myself through the sun for a year. And I started getting real good at it, saying it real fast. And she goes, oh my God. And she starts screaming, hits the floor, and starts hugging my legs. And I'm like, oh man, please stop. And then a security guy comes over because she's holding my leg and screaming. And everybody's going, and he's going, he actually is going to pull his gun out. And I said, I'm not doing nothing. The woman's nuts. And everybody's going, yeah, it's her. And he helps her up from the floor. And he goes, what's going on? And she says, God told me to talk to this man. And my husband's got the same cancer. And the guy goes, why don't you two go outside? So I went outside with her, talked to her husband. Now, what's the odds of that? What's the odds? I don't know. These things, that's why I'm saying the odds started changing. And it's like, are these people really getting the feeling, or somebody really nudging them to come talk to me? So that one was getting me to the point where I was getting a little irritated. And so I wound up, I called the imam, I called my priest, I called my Hindu priest, I called the rabbi, and I went and met with all of them, and they all said the same thing. Just let it happen and do what you got. You know what you're supposed to do. Help them. And that was meaningful when all these different heads of different religions are telling me the same thing. And the only reason why I knew them was because my friends from my work who prayed for me in all these other religions that I knew that were friends of mine. That's cool. So I had people in all these religions praying for me. And somebody listens to these prayers. I don't know who they are, where they are, how they get it, but kind of know how they get it. But the point is, I think it gets there. And when somebody's name is being screamed out in many different religions, then it brings attention. And I believe that now. Now, this is the big one. I go to the dollar store after all this stuff, and I went to talk to my minister, but he was too busy. And I can go on and on. And when I get my memoirs done, I realized that a guy said, you need to write memoirs, not a book.
Definitely.
You write memoirs in the form of a book. And you tell these stories, but I got documentation on most of them, all of it really. So I go to this dollar store. It's Valentine's. What was it? Valentine's Day? No, wait a minute. It was no, it was Christmas. It was Christmas, and it was a couple days before Christmas. And I was buying some flowers that I was going to give to my wife that were artificial in a vase for Christmas. And I'm in the register, and this African American guy was behind me. And we were talking about the flowers, how real they look. And he says, the exact words were, I said, well, this is my first Christmas since my cancer, and I'm supposed to be dead, but I'm not, and blah, blah, blah. And I just did it like that. And all of a sudden he looks at me and he says, now I'm going to use invitations because I'm good at it. My wife said it's disrespectful, but I don't think so. I think it adds to the storyline as you're telling a story. But he said, "Oh yeah," he said. "Well, let me tell you something." He said, "I was dead for over 55 minutes. They had already put me on the gurney, took me down to the refrigeration unit, had put a toe tag on my foot, and they were sliding me into the refrigeration unit, and I woke up."
Wow.
And I said, "What?" He goes, "I woke up. So I don't want to hear about living. I was dead." I said, "Did you see anything?" He said, "No, I didn't see nothing." And I said, "So wait a minute." And now I was intrigued because this story was more, for me, it was more inspiring to hear this story. So the woman that's my cash register lady, she says, "Why don't you two go outside?" So we left all her groceries on the conveyor belt, and she said, "We'll take care of it," because she's listened to us talk. So we go outside of the Dollar Tree store, and we're talking, and we're exchanging the stories, and he's telling me, he said, and all of a sudden, and I said, "Well, let me finish mine," and I finished mine up for him, like I told you, but a little faster. And then he just started crying. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he goes, he says, "I got to hug you, man." And he hugs me and he goes, "I think for over 4 years, I've been trying to figure out why I was kept alive." And he looks right in my eyes and the tears would come down. He says, "I was kept alive to talk to you." Now, I don't know if that was a lie or it was a made up story, but I'll tell you what, it hit a home run in my head and it just made me cry. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, we've both been through a lot, and I guess we were supposed to meet each other." And then I remember that woman that dropped down and started kissing my feet. And I got the chills up my body so hard, and it whacked me that I just lost control, and I just went down to my knees and I kissed his feet. And I said, "I just want to thank you, because I was deciding what to do and what not to do, how to do it, where to go, and I really don't know. But you just gave me a battery charge when I was on E." And I said, I guess maybe we all were kept alive for a reason. Maybe we're all puzzle pieces in a big puzzle. He says, you're right, we are. And then we went to my truck, and I said, where'd you park? He said, I'm parked right here. He's parked right next to my truck in this whole big parking lot.
Mm.
I said, how
And
about
what are the
that?
chances of that as well? I mean,
Huh?
I know
What's
how big
that?
those parking lots are in the US, and it's
It was,
what are the chances? I mean, they're like
it
about
was to
5 or 6 times the size of the ones here.
There was there he was parked right next to me, and
Yeah.
I had this avalanche with this saddlebag, and I had the cancer story in the back because I had just went to a service call back to a African American woman, and I was there when I just when I got better, and I did a call, and I gave her one of the magazines at the hospital I was in. Now, the day before, I went back to her house a year, whatever it was later. She had another issue. Water was leaking, and she had all these boxes in front of the door that was to the water cutoff. And she goes, just throw all the boxes. It's all trash. I'm throwing everything away. So I threw all the boxes on the floor, and the only box that opened up, my magazine slid onto the floor. And she went upstairs. And I said, this woman's throwing away this magazine I gave her. So I put it in the back behind my back in my pants and pulled my jacket back over it because she's throwing away. I'm taking it back. So I turned the water off and fixed it real quick. And she goes, well, how much are you? I said, don't worry about it. It's fine now. I just tightened up the packet nut.
Yeah.
And she goes, you sure you don't want to pay me? I said, no, you paid me. And I went back and I put that magazine in that saddlebag. And the man standing next to me says, you got any information about your story of cancer? And I just smiled. I said, I was just at an African American woman's house yesterday, and I got one back. And I opened it up and I handed it to him. And he said, oh man, that's all right, thank you. I said, you know what? Something's telling me to ask you this. I
Mm.
said, you wouldn't happen to be a Mason, would you? He said, what do you mean, like a Freemason? And I said, yeah. He said, absolutely. And I said, oh my gosh, okay, that's one in a million. I said, okay. And I said, give me a hug in the Grand Masonic word. And he did. Now he's Prince Hall, and I'm uh, I'm not Prince Hall. It's the same. Everything's the same except they have their own black masonry group, and that was even bigger. And then I got the big chill up me, and I said, "Did you just get the chill?" And he said, "Oh yeah, that's God. That's God. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's God." And
Mm.
and I said, "What's your name?" He goes, "You don't need my name." He said, "I'll see you again." And he got in his car and drove away.
Mm.
So, and I got a lot more, but those are the big ones that keeps me in track. And whenever I start to fall off, another one comes up.
You
But
mentioned masonry as well. I mean, what first drew you into masonry?
well, my grandfather and grandmother came from Scotland. They immigrated here.
Mm.
My grandfather was born in 1893 in Scotland, and I think he was 16 or 17 when he came. Wait a minute, I'll take it back. 93 is 17. 18. He's like 21, 22 years old. He came over in 1913, and he came from Scotland to West Virginia and worked in the coal mines. And then World War I broke out, and he was already trained in Scotland for war, so as an infantry. And so he went into World War I. He came out, and my grandmother had had two children by then, but now he was a U.S. citizen because he had fought in World War I. So my grandmother and their two children came here to America, and that's how we came to America. And he was a Mason, and I have 700 years of Masonry in my family. It
Wow.
goes
Oh.
it goes all the way back uh, around the 1300s. My family is Dickson, Dickson, and we are a member of the Keith clan, which is which is from the Cathars, And the Cathars come from tribe Gad. And from what I can understand is tribe Gad was with King David, and the head, now this is where it gets creepy. Supposedly tribe Gad, the head of tribe Gad was the inspirational motivator of King David. He gave him guidance. Now that's creepy, but that's the order. And I'm the first. That's another long story. I don't get into that. But anyway, the point is
Yeah, I was
that
just
the
curious. I mean,
masonry,
I think that's a really long story, actually, isn't
yeah,
it?
that's too long.
But
But
it's
the
yeah.
masonry goes back to then. And then when my father died, um, at his funeral, we had 300 people, and they were all squeezing my hand and giving me a handshake that I realized it was the same one from all these different people. And my knuckles were like really beat up from that day. I put it that way. My whole hand was beat up. When they shake your hand, they squeeze your knuckles together. So they were all sore. So anyway, but that's so from when he passed away, and after that funeral, and everybody said that my father was one of the best Masons they ever knew, because Masonry really is the only organized fraternity that can bring the world together, because it's all religions, all ethnic backgrounds, all political backgrounds, and you come together under your own choice of ritual, meaning your Bible, your Quran, your Torah, whatever it is. Even if you don't believe in anything, you just got to believe that there's a higher power. And I believe that anybody who doesn't believe that there's a higher power, they got something wrong with them, because there's definitely something out there that's more powerful than we are. And they had a hand in what we're doing, no pun intended. But yeah, I mean, and masonry, when
there's
I
an
saw,
awful lot of misunderstanding about masonry.
what's that?
And there's an awful lot of misunderstanding about masonry, and so
Absolutely.
many conspiracy theories out there, unfortunately, these days. So, unfortunately, a lot of people don't see the positive aspects of this, and the fact
Well,
that a lot of things within our society, even people don't realize it. It's like they stand, in elections, they get elected to councils or to parliaments. What are they doing? When they're getting elected, that process of election, that process of taking minutes, of respecting each other, regardless whether the other
I think
MP or
one,
councillor is a Muslim or a Hindu or white or black, or this actually comes from masonry, but people don't know it. So even people that are not masons
well,
have
everything,
actually following aspects of it without realizing it.
they're doing it and they don't know it.
Mm.
I've met many women whose fathers were Masons, and I could tell by the way they acted and treated people that, and then and sometimes they would find out about me, or I'd find out about them, and they would say, "Oh, my dad was a Mason." Well, he was teaching you by his actions, not by memorization, but the way he treats people. And when I became one, I realized when I was finished, and I said, you know what? I was a Mason my whole life and didn't know it. It's about helping people. It's about stepping up. It's about being prepared to say the right thing. Like when I was a Boy Scout, and by the way, Boy Scouts was created by Mason. But now it's it's the Scouts, but which is, I don't want to, anyway. It was the Boy Scouts, who were trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. If you just take those words and just live by them, but the best ones of all was my grandmother's from Scotland, and she said to me, "I'll tell you this story. This is a good one. When I was a little boy, she had 11 children, so she would go and stay at each one of the children's houses and cook and clean and take care of the kids. So the first time she came to our house, she says to me, we're going to the bed now. I'm trying to go to bed, and you're going to say your prayers." And I said, okay. So I said, I had a little toy chest. Then that was like a pirate's chest or a Templar chest, and I didn't even know it at that time, but that's what it was. And I put my hands together and I said, "Dear Lord," I said, "I want that train for Christmas. I want that bicycle." And that woman hit me so hard, knocked me into the wall. And she goes, "What in the world are you doing?" And I said, "Why do you hit me? What you hit me for, Granny?" She said, "Because you don't pray like that, boy." You don't play. Who taught you how to do that? And I said, nobody. She goes, you play for others. You don't play for yourself. What's the matter with you, boy?
Oh,
I'll whack you 3 more times if you do that. And
mm,
she slammed the door and left. And again, now my father beats my ass. Now grandmother's beating my ass. So she said to me, and I laid in that bed and cried because I couldn't believe she hit me. But now I know where my dad got it from. So when I had the cancer and I told me I was going to die and had to have surgery, that's I got on my hands and knees and I prayed to God and I said, you know what? I'm going to do something unorthodox here. I haven't done anything to deserve this. I've got 3 kids that are growing up, and if this is the way you treat me, and I went off on a tangent. If you remember that story I told you about the football coach, the way he did me,
yeah.
I took the old man out upstairs just like that. And I said, if this is the way you feel about me, then just kill me. Get me out of this planet. I'm done. But apparently what I did is not good, and you can't be good either if you're going to take good people and get rid of them. And I cried, and I said, I'm not praying for myself. I'm praying for my kids and my wife and my friends. And I got in bed, and I must have cried all night. That pillow was soaking wet in the morning. Then I went to the doctor's office, and that's when that doctor said to me, well, Fred, it's the type of cancer you have. It looks like you could be a good candidate, which is an important word, for the first oral robotic surgery in Maryland Hopkins history. And my wife says, well, how many have you done? And he says, I just told you, we've never done one before. And my wife said, well, who designed the head? And he said, it was designed in Penn University. My wife says, I'm from Pittsburgh. We're going to Penn. I looked at her and I said, no, we're not. We're not going to Penn. If they want me to be the first, he said, I can't guarantee that. I cannot guarantee that. He said, but you're a good candidate. And we need a good spokesperson. But at that moment, I got the chill and I knew I was going to get it. So,
Amazing. Yeah.
and then the journey started that way. But that's the story on that. And if when you take
The thing
all
that
this,
struck me as well when you first told me about this some years ago was when you told me you went back to playing football after this battle with cancer that
in the
very nearly killed
neck,
you. You
in
know,
the neck throat,
yeah.
they told me, oh my, well, it's tight here. The doctor said you can't do this. Your neck and bones are radiated
Mm.
to the over the extreme amount that a normal person can have, and you shouldn't do this. And I just felt invincible, and I said, I know how to play and not get hurt. I know how to do it, and I did. And I started. I'm the oldest man to play 3 consecutive championship games, but 30 years apart. I won the championship in '83 as a starting defensive end. I won the championship in 1984 as a starting defensive end, and in 2013. I went back giving lectures to my football team, college team, and professional semi-pro, and I wound up playing football and getting back because I was in that movie, The Replacements, and the assistant director I became good friends with, and he said, you know, you really ought to try to go back and play if you're working out and running and exercising. Well, that was 2013, so I had 2 years of exercising and running, and so when I gave the lecture to the semi-pro team. Uh, the coach, I had the radio coach, I had the coach on my radio show, and I came in and talked to the team. It was different talking to a college team than talking to a semi-pro team. But anyway, I called him up and I called him up that night and I said, do you think I could come back and play? And he laughed. Remember, I told you about all those things are set in time and coincidence, but they're not. He said, Fred, I'm getting ready at this moment to send in the final roster. If you want to play, you can play. And he was able to put my name on the list. If I call 1 minute later, I'm not playing. And of course, my wife said, I'm not taking care of you. You hurt yourself. You're out of here. Doctors telling me
Of
I
course
couldn't
you
do it.
did.
But see, you
Yeah.
get that little bit of an invincibility, and then you want to test it. And I think George Washington had it because he sat up on the hill and during a battle, and he just sat there as a target. And I don't know how many times, but they hit his uniform like at least 5 or 6 times, but they didn't hit him. And I believe he was testing it. He was testing to see.
I heard about that. I mean, to be
I
honest,
think he was testing it to see. So I know
because there was a particular time also in that conflict when basically, by all normal logical standards, the American forces should have been defeated.
Absolutely.
You know, because they had nothing at that particular point, you know, and if things had just been very slightly different, it would have been finished. It would have been over. And some strange things happened that made sure that didn't happen. And look at America now, 250 years later. I mean, it is remarkable, you know.
George was a Mason, and he was he took his. They actually have
as even our king he attested to in Congress just the other day.
And you know, and all of Masonry. Now that I understand history and on all the different things that I've walked through, is that this Masonry, the way it works, the original Masons, you have to go back, and I'm hypothesizing this, so it's just my feelings. When I was in Scotland at the Grand Lodge of Scotland, they have a lot of ornaments there, or museum pieces from China, and they talk about the Garden of Eden, and they call the ancient free and accepted gardeners. And I believe the unions were originally in the garden, which means people worked in, you know, for food. You know, they talk about before the flood that man ate fruits and vegetables. They didn't eat meat; they ate fruits and vegetables. And you know, when you go back to that, there's a lot of things tied into that fruits and vegetables. There's protection of the fields from animals, insects. There's watering. There's the fertilizer. There's the harvesting. How to harvest the seeds. There's a lot involved. But there's one thing that's very important in gardening, and that's stonemasonry. You had to build the retaining walls. You had to build the areas to confine the ground from rain and flooding, and you know, wearing the ground down. And so there were stonemasons that actually, there were stone pickers, then there were stone stackers, and then there were stone choosers, and then the stone stackers would stack them. And they would, what I do understand too is, when you don't have books, magazines, or work to sidetrack you, and you enjoy your job because you think you're helping God and the people that you work with, God and your country, how about that? And you're doing this job of collecting stones, and you're pretty good at it, because that's all your job is, to go down the stream, the lake, the river, and pick up rocks and bring them back. And then the other guy had an acute eye, and he would stack the rocks and to do the jobs that they needed to do with the rocks. And then they started making buildings with them and doorways. And this is how it started out. But then as time goes on, you say, well, how did they get to vulcanary? How did they know the metals? Well, I figured that out too. They figured out the metals when they were in caves. And I learned this when I was in Scotland, that they lived in the Highlands, were up in caves. And at night is when they went to work. In the day, there was a lot of things that could get you, but at night, there was only certain type of animals that could get you. So they had to learn by the stars on how to move. And that's how the sailors started. So they had to sail at night and only wander the coast.
There was no GPS in those days. There was only the stars.
That's right. That's why they knew the stars. And so when you take that together, in the caves at night, they would burn a fire to keep at the entrance, to keep the animals out. And when one of the caves, apparently they did it, and the ore at the ceiling fell to the ground after it got real hot. And when they clean up the fire the next day and hold the ashes for the next day, they found these little balls all over the place. And they played with them, and they didn't know what they were. Well, it could have been gold.
It must have started something like that.
And then somebody realized that if you take these little balls, they came out of the heat, they must go back into the heat. So they did that, and that's how they began mixing, and that's how the vulcanary and the metal And how all that came to play was by everything we do is because of nature and animals and insects. We wouldn't even want to fly if there wasn't birds. You know that, right? If we hadn't seen birds fly, we would have never wanted to fly. And if it wasn't for bees and the queen bee, the queen was not a queen bee. They picked the queen bee and turned her into a queen bee. And that's where we get the queens and kings. When you sit down and evaluate what we're doing everything because nature told us to do it. And when you go into the Hindu religion, you'll see the elephant, the horses, the snake, the monkey. They're not praying to them because they're gods. They're praying to them because they're creatures that gave us the ideas that we use today in mankind. That's exactly what they are. The horse gives you strength, transport. The elephant gives you strength and unity. And the women elephants stay in the middle and take care of the baby elephants and the older elephants and the
People
male.
are obsessed too much on the fact that things look differently outwardly, but once you look underneath the surface, then you start to see this. I mean, it's like, as it says in the Quran about reflecting, we not use reason and reflect upon the signs of God. The word in the Quran is referring to two different books. One is the books that are of revelation, so like the Quran, the Torah, the Gospel, and the other book is the book of nature. And, that's literally when you do science, when you make observation of the natural world and get inspired by it. It's the same wisdom now. And that's why many Muslims in the early days, they pursued the sciences. They were just following this inspiration that come from the book and taking it to the next level.
Exactly. And when I had my stone shop, my first workers were Turkish Muslims, and I had three of them, and they worked in the stone shop with me every day. I broke bread with them. They're a little sloppy when they eat because they eat with their fingers and they eat off each other's plate.
Yeah.
I got used to that after a while. But I went to Ramadan. I went to the mosque on Fridays because they wouldn't work on Fridays. And so I said, well, if you're going to take off, then I got to take off. So I wound up going with them. Now, it was all in Turkish, so I didn't know what they were saying, but I could figure out what they were doing. And when I went there, I went to their mosque with them for, my company was St. John's Kitchen, Bath, and Stone. And the imam told them they couldn't park the truck. I had a big F Ford 350 20-foot truck and with the jungle and granite and everything. And the imam told me couldn't park that truck on their St. John's. Anyway, so I learned a lot with them, and I broke bread with them, and we cracked jokes. We had fun, but they showed their true colors when I got sick with cancer. They took off and wouldn't help. And every time I tried to hire other people to come with them, they chased them away and threatened them, and I didn't even know it until I ran into those people later on. We had work with the worst was we had about a $5,000 kitchen, and it was four of us. I had one end, and the other three had the other end. I was like 350 pounds and very strong. So, but when we got to the door, they had that little symbol in the corner for the Jewish people, and they dropped the stone. And they said, we're not going in there for that. No, no, no. And they took off and they ran back to the truck.
Well, that's really bad.
And I was so upset. And they refused to go back in there. And I said, well, you can walk back to the shop. It wasn't that far away. And I went up to Home Depot and got a couple of Latinos to help me carry it in there. And then I did the rest of the work myself. But I was so upset. I said, how could you do that to me? And they were like, Fred, we cannot go in those people's house. And
this is, I mean, this again, it's their prejudice because it's got nothing to do with Islam. Far from it. As Muslims, we should be. I mean, even the Prophet himself, he did business with Jews, and in the Constitution of Medina, he said that the Jew. He mentioned the names of the Jewish tribes and the Muslim tribes in Medina when he put the Constitution together, and he said that we are one ummah. We have different beliefs, but we're one ummah. I mean, this is what is these people on? Honestly, it's ridiculous.
Well, I've
had that
understood
experience.
masonry. Again, back to
And
masonry.
actually, it's really odd because, you know, in Turkey, there is actually a large Jewish population there that's been there since they were expelled from Spain. And they're still there to this day, and they're very happy there. So obviously, these particular people and the way they behave couldn't be representing Turkish people generally. But
Well,
it's really sad when people behave in that way.
you know for a fact, there's everybody says this and everybody says that, but there are extremists in political parties.
Mm.
There are extremists in religions. They're on one side to the other, and the point is, and the thing I understand is all these religions are intertwined. They're all, I've gone in,
Of course
I've
they
been to
are. Yeah.
temple for 10 years. I've been to the Catholic
Mm.
Church. I converted to Catholicism. I can go on and on and on. And what I've learned is, the things you do with the beads in the corner, that's the rosary. You're doing a rosary. I mean, but you're doing your own thing. All these religions overlap. They take things from one to form the next, from the next to form the next. And that is because it's all based on the same thing, Paul. It's your signs.
Mm.
God gives you signs like the stories I've showed you with my voice in the past hour and a half, is that every decision you make is divine. It's been given to you since birth. Everything that walks the planet today, from an insect to a human, we're nothing but drones doing our job. We think that we got free will, but I'm telling you right now, it's programmed in us with an app that makes us feel that way. But everything you're doing, if something comes up to you, you have a choice. If you make this decision, the divine path opens up that way. If you do that decision, the divine path opens up that way. If you don't do anything at all, that's because your divine weren't supposed to. And then when you change it and fight it, then you say, well, I won. No, you didn't. You won because you were supposed to fight and go that other way. And if you can get somebody to talk to you about these religions, I've been very blessed to not start with the parishioners or the members. I got invited and walked in by some of the highest donors of all these religions, and then they take me directly, because they say, you, Freddie, you survived the cancer. We prayed for you in the Hindu temple. The priest wants to meet you. He wants you to talk to the people there. And when can you come? Hey, Rabbi, Fred, we want you to come. We want you to come to our synagogue and tell your story. And, they made me an honorary, they gave me an honorary bar mitzvah. And my Jewish name is, oh, geez, I said it in a while. Forgot. The 13th tribe of Israel. It slipped. But anyway, they couldn't pray for me in a synagogue unless I was Jewish. So they gave me, they can make you a Jew on a spot. And I can't remember the name. I'm sorry, I've been talking so much, I slipped. But anyway, they prayed for me, and that's the only way they could pray for me was with a Jewish name and a bar mitzvah. So I got everything honorary. I get a lot of stuff honorary, and that was interesting because I learned a lot. I'd already been to the synagogue many, many, many times. But when you go in all these religions, and the newest one I went to was about 4 years ago, the Sikhs. They took me in and dressed me all up and went through there. But again, it was in Pakistani. It wasn't. It was in Indian. Maybe it was Indian. I don't know. One of the different languages. But when I watch and I'm observing when I go. I'm not talking. I'm watching, and they're all doing stuff from each other. And they're all doing the Catholics, the Cardinals got the yarmulke, you got the beads, you got the rose. I mean, you can go, and if you get into it deeper and deeper, you can watch it and see it, and then you go, wait a minute, Catholic Church is nothing but Hinduism in a different version, and it is. And you see it all, but the most common denominator is your signs.
Mm.
When you see your signs, you're not paying attention to them until you're getting them every day. But unless your senses are taken to a higher realm where your sense, it's why it's called a sense, it's relaying the message that it feels first to the brain. But if you can train your senses to see things that you don't normally pay attention, if your job keeps you away from it, if your religion keeps you away from it, if your politics keeps you away from it, if your family keeps you away from it, you don't see it. But
Yes.
then if you convert or you go into a new religion or you go back to your old one or you pray, all of a sudden the universe will give you what you want if you want it long enough. If you get something new, somebody that comes into Islam, they come over from Baptists and they come in and they start, and all these great things start happening to them.
It
They
says, it
start
says in the
seeing it.
Quran, God guides whom he wills and who wishes to be guided. A lot of people say the God guides whom he wills, but and who wishes to be guided. It just has to come from us. It's not about the label. It's about wishing to be guided. It's about wanting that connection with the divine and also with our fellow human beings and fellow creation, and not just human beings, even the animals, the creatures that we share this earth with. Having that connection, that's what it's really about. And people give that different names, and of course it takes different forms, which is where all of the religions have come from. They've evolved, but it is heart. That's what it's really about, and it's wanting that. Some
You
people
and I
don't want that. They just fall into something that they were given by the parents, a system of rituals, but it doesn't mean anything to them. But when it actually means something to you and you want that connection, that's what it's about. Whatever you call it, you know.
You and I could start our own religion tomorrow. I could run around telling my stories. You tell your stories. We tell everybody to pray, and all these good things start happening. To go, oh, Fred and Paul, they've got it. God's working with them. Oh my, let me give you some money. We'll be back next week. And you could do that because once all these religions have great stories and miracles that they can express, and it's only because you have asked the universe to give it to you.
Mm.
And the common denominator is everybody has their own signs. And if you missed it in the past hour and a half talking of your own, seeing connections and things like that, don't worry about it. There's more coming tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And the child being born 10 minutes ago, they're all lining up for him and his family or her family. It's real. We're all intertwined.
Definitely.
Talk about you and I talked about
what a wonderful note to end on, because I know I'm conscious of the fact it has been over an hour and a half now, and I'm also conscious of that I haven't seen you have a glass of water, so you know it's you know I don't want to be like that coach that was making you run around the track without having a glass of water. So
that was a lot of fun, and you know I'm glad we stayed on topic and got us to where we are. And I think your listeners and my friends can relate to some of the stories. And the best thing to do to close this would be to just, here's how we're going to close it. I learned this from the Hindus. We're not going to say anything. I want you to just keep your eyes, close your eyes, and for the next 10 seconds, say whatever they want to yourself. Because you know why? Somebody's listening.
good, yeah.
That's enough.
Awesome.
And you know what? I learned that from the Hindus because I said, let's pray. And my Hindu buddy said, Fred, you don't need to pray. No. Go to hit your words. Here's it. He hears it now. And that's good. And I love that. And that's how I have the Thanksgiving Sunrise of Silence every year, too. That's another show.
Awesome. Well, maybe, I mean, I can see there's so much more we could have discussed as well. And yeah, well, let's do another one another time. You know, it's always a pleasure, Fred, and thank you so much for joining us.
I said I hope I didn't bore you too much.
Absolutely not. You're never boring. That's one thing I'll say. Definitely not.
All right, brother. All right.
Well, thank you so much, brother. You take care. God bless.
Keep checking for your signs. One's coming next.
Yep. You too. God bless.